Hello everyone, it's Silver. This is Wyvia. Wyvia? Okay, so here's the thing. I don't know if it's pronounced Wyvern or Wyvern because I've heard both throughout my life many times. So I think I just sort of have to choose one and go with it because I'm pretty sure no matter which one I choose, someone's gonna be mad. So for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna roll a d20. 1 through 10, it's Wyvern. 11 through 20, it's Wyvern. Wyvern it is. So Wyvia is an action RPG that's going for like an open world dungeon crawler that's been heavily influenced by JRPGs, and it's got a pretty open world. I mean, it's got a world map, like a JRPG style world map where you roam around, and there are of course towns and stuff that you can zoom into and actually go to, and lots of dungeons to visit, some of which are optional. And the first thing you'll notice when you begin is, of course, the art style. So it looks pretty cool. It's got a sort of a chunky, voxely look to it, but it's also got some relatively detailed sprites and things. And in fact, there are entire options menus that allow you to alter your sprites. So you can unlock various sprites and change how your character looks, both in their normal human and wyvern form, because you do get one of those. It also has an appropriately sort of bit-crushed soundscape that is actually pretty clear a lot of the times in terms of like music and stuff, but in terms of sound effects and the like, you're going for more of like a lo-fi approach, and it all actually sounds pretty good, and it creates a very classic JRPG atmosphere, I think. And you'll also notice that pretty much all of the enemies are absolutely adorable, and you'll feel very bad for killing them. They're all super cute. You'll also notice that this game doesn't really have much in the way of player guidance. It's basically got no tutorial. You just sort of get plopped into the world map and you go. But it also does a good job of guiding you in ways that aren't so overt. Like, it doesn't have things that pop up on the screen and tell you what to do, but it still has guidance. The thing about this game's world is, even though it's quite open, you are limited in terms of your exploration by the fact that you need various traversal abilities to actually get to new places, and this is how the game guides you. It gives you a selection of places that you can reach, and then a whole bunch of places outside of that you can't reach yet, and then you're sort of expected to explore everything that you can currently get to in order to obtain the abilities you need to actually go farther, and then you'll open up a little bit more of the world map that way, which will lead you to a new set of places and usually a new town, and so on until you actually eventually get the ability to fly. But you'll start out doing things like getting your wyvern form completely, which will allow you to bypass large boulders that were previously blocking your way, and then you'll get the ability to use your wyvern form to travel through water or travel through lava and things like that. And this is how the world actually opens itself up, while also limiting you in terms of where you can go, so that it doesn't need any sort of like hard guidance quest markers that tell you exactly where you need to go. It instead just sort of hems you in a pretty large world by just making you only able to access certain percentages of it until you get certain abilities. You mostly gain these new abilities for your wyvern form by getting crystals, which you'll get from beating bosses of various dungeons throughout the map. So there are both optional and main story dungeons. The optional ones tend to be like smaller caves and things, whereas the main story ones are often much more large and complex temples and the like. So there's a good variety of places to go. There are also, of course, towns that you can find, and these are pretty important because you will want their fast travel points. Every town has a sort of teleporter. Some of the dungeons also have teleporters in them, but not all of them. And towns are where you'll want to go to spend all your money, because you will be getting lots of money from killing monsters. However, if you die, you lose half of the money you're currently holding. However, every town has a bank in it that allows you to deposit money into it, and this keeps it safe from being lost when you die. And it also, you can spend money directly from your bank account. You don't have to withdraw it or anything first, which is nice. So just make sure to visit the bank regularly to keep your money safe. And while you're chilling around in town, you can find other NPCs for various things. Some of them will just give you hints on where to go next and stuff, but a lot of them also have other functions, like the guild, which you can turn in objectives, like achievement-style stuff, to get some extra gold on the side. There will also be a smith that you can use to equip and upgrade weapons and armor. This game has a class-based system, and every different class can equip different types of stuff. And you'll start with just a basic selection at first, but eventually you'll go to the smith and give them some materials and make whatever you need for the current class you're actually using. And you can then spend more of that resource in order to upgrade it all the way up to +5, at which point it will become an entirely new item with a new sprite and some new animations and stuff, depending on what it is. And then you can upgrade that one up to +5, and then it'll evolve into a new form, and so on, in order to ascend your equipment through various levels. So this is not a game where you find equipment most of the time, and you don't buy it either. You instead craft it and then upgrade it through various evolving forms at the smith. And weapons and armor take separate resources to upgrade. So the shards that you're using to make your weapon stronger are different from the shards you're using to make your armor stronger. The one piece of equipment that you will find are accessories, and you actually have a ton of accessory slots in this game, although you don't start with any of them. You have to level your character up in order to actually obtain them. But like every 5 levels, basically after a certain threshold or so, you'll eventually start getting more and more of them. And accessories can be very powerful, but they start out relatively simple. However, eventually, once you get far enough into the game, you'll find jeweler NPCs that can use a third different resource that's more rare than the other 2 for weapons and armors to upgrade your various accessories and make them a lot stronger. So they will eventually become like build-defining powerful items as you get the necessary resources to upgrade them. So I mentioned a class system, and yeah, this game has a class system. It's very much inspired by like your Final Fantasy style of class system, because it's got some simple classes that you can level up, and then once you get them to max level, you unlock more different ones to level up, and certain ones require like a max level and other classes put together. So there's a good amount of variety. I believe there are 10 classes to choose from, and each one has 3 active abilities that you can learn, as well as a host of like 6 to 8 passive abilities that can be all sorts of things, from like stat increases to improvements to their actives to other things like that. One thing to mention is you actually have a character level and a class level separately. So your character level levels up a little bit slower, whereas your class level is a bit faster. Character level gives you attribute points that you can actually spend on increasing your stats. There's a large selection of stats in the game for everything from like physical and magical attack, physical and magical defense, your max HP, your max MP, your speed, all that kind of stuff. So there's a good variety of, well, a good build variety, I guess you could say, in terms of what you can actually spec yourself towards. But you also get some Wyvern points as you level your character up, and well, Wyvern skill points. There's actually something else called Wyvern points. That's a different thing. But the skill points that you get from leveling your character are able to be used on a Wyvern-specific skill tree that can learn from 4 different active skills and a whole bunch of different passive skills to improve the effectiveness of the form itself. And then as you level up, you'll also get Wyvern points, separate from the skills, that are what you actually use to fuel the transformation itself. The points are your gauge that you actually expend in order to remain in this form. And as you use skills, and just by taking time down, you'll use up these points, and taking damage also uses up a large number of points depending on the amount of damage you take, and if you completely run out of points while in the form, you will die, so you gotta be careful about that. But the class skill level, this actually gives you skill points that you can spend on that class's skill tree. So there's definitely a lot of points to be spent in this game, but that's a kind of a cool thing, because it means that, you know, a lot of action RPGs go for a bit of a more streamlined approach. So having all of this sort of nitty-gritty stat distribution and a lot of different class-based skill trees to go through and stuff is a cool idea. I like it. A lot of skills can actually be used by other classes if you max out their levels. Some of them don't have this, but every skill has some sort of bonus. Both the active and the passive ones have a bonus if you max out usually 10 skill points in it, although some of your Wyvern skills go up to 20. And if you do this, you'll get some sort of benefit, and a lot of times it's the ability to use that skill even when you change class to something else. So a lot of your passives and actives and stuff will stay with you as you level up multiple classes, and you'll eventually create a sort of more powerful character overall that can do multiple different things. And this is also a good reason why you can craft all the different kinds of equipment that you want and keep them all on your person at all times, and then equip whatever is appropriate for the class you're currently using, because you'll eventually end up sort of hybridizing yourself depending on the different sorts of classes you're going to go through. And the classes are pretty fun. They do a good job of having a good amount of variety. So you've got your classics like your warrior and your mage, but you've also got like a summoner and a ninja and like a Valkyrie and some other stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of playstyle variety when it comes to the classes, which is of course a good thing, because most of what you're doing in the game is going to be exploring and fighting, because the main progression is all based on going through dungeons and fighting bosses. And I think maybe the biggest high point for the game would be its dungeon design, because they tend to be really large and complex dungeons, each one sort of having its own theme, its own set of enemies, its own like visual and aesthetic theme, but also its own theme in terms of how you navigate it, because oftentimes they have unique hazards or something about them that makes them different from all the other dungeons you've faced so far. Some of them have a whole bunch of gates that you have to learn how to lower, and it sort of blocks off certain parts of the dungeon until you can find the switches for them and slowly opens it up as you go. Some of them have a whole bunch of fire traps or lava that you have to bypass by using your Wyvern form, but only once you've actually gotten the ability to do that. And some of them have invisible walls everywhere, and you've got to use this sort of seeing eye thing that's like a magical device throughout this haunted mansion in order to actually see which walls are false and which ones are real, and sort of go through this maze of hidden walls. So there's a whole bunch of different dungeons to go through, and I like that they're all pretty significantly sized. Like, they get pretty complex, especially in like the latter half of the game. They have a lot of hidden treasure chests and stuff for you to find. There are a bunch of chests with like money and accessories and stuff like that, and so it's always a big reason to explore these dungeons, aside from just going straight to the boss. You want to find every path you can, because there's really good loot everywhere. And in fact, the game has a mechanic related to all this dungeon exploration, so if you just leave a dungeon and come back, all of the enemies in it will respawn. This also counts for the world map, by the way. But if you kill all of the enemies in a dungeon, then they won't respawn. They'll actually stay dead, and instead, this red portal will appear somewhere at the beginning of the dungeon, and you can interact with this portal and spend a resource in order to respawn the enemies on purpose, but you can choose the level range to respawn them at. So you get this stuff called monster essence from slaying monsters mostly, and you can spend it at these portals to just simply respawn the monsters as they were by using a minimum amount of essence, or you can use more essence to enhance the level of the monsters and make them tougher but more rewarding. And you actually get a higher chance of like champion monsters and stuff as you go up in tier and make them more and more difficult. And of course they'll also award you a bunch more XP and stuff too, so you can level up classes easier, or your actual character level itself. So you can use this to kind of farm if you want to, but you don't really have to. So I think this is a pretty cool mechanic because it allows you to revisit old dungeons and actually make them more difficult for yourself on purpose to get better rewards. I think that's a cool idea, and in a game that has this many dungeons, that's a pretty cool thing. You'll also sometimes find these red portals in other areas that haven't been cleared out, and these instead will transport you to an arena where a wave of difficult monsters will spawn in like a big chunk all at you at once, and if you're able to survive the onslaught, then you'll get a free stat point. So overall, it's a pretty solid action RPG that's doing a lot of very fun things with its aesthetic and with its mechanics that just makes it an enjoyable sort of dungeon crawler style of experience. It feels pretty old school while also having some modern quality of life and stuff, and it's also very cheap. It's only $10, which I think is a perfect price for a game with a pretty solid amount of content in it, and it makes it really easy to recommend because it's just a pretty fun time. It doesn't do anything that's like crazy new or crazy difficult, but what it does is lighthearted fun, and it's good at lighthearted fun. And if you're looking for like just an enjoyable little dungeon crawler, this is definitely an easy pickup for only $10. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page so that you can check out Wyvia. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.